Hey, what's up, guys? It's Elmer Brown Enriquez, your host of Artistic Visions, the show where we like to go in depth with young artists at OCAD, talk about their art, what they like to talk about in their art, and what they would like to talk about in their art. In today's episode, I got a very special guest for a Grad X special episode, Laiken, bro.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. You know, I heard that it was snowing, so you got caught in some snow.
Yes, it was quite a strange morning on late March. No,
April.
Late April.
It's
Holy
late April.
See, there you go. That's that thesis time warp. It's
Yeah.
felt like it's been dragging on forever. But yeah, it was a very strange wake up. I went outside. I was in my windbreaker, and then 5 minutes later, I'm at the bus stop, and it starts snowing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's you know, to signify what the day is to come on this beautiful April 20th. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's just start my interview here with the first question. Who are you, and what kind of art do you usually make?
Yeah, so my name is Laiken Bro. I'm a graphic designer by trade, but I've been sort of transitioning more into an artistic practice. So I sort of refer to myself now as an interdisciplinary artist and designer. I work a lot with many mediums. My practice starts with like photography, so it's photography based, and it's a lot of digital manipulation and digital creation that then gets transferred or transformed into an analog process of either screen print, lithography, stencil art, aerosol. It kind of encompasses a large range of mediums and stuff. So I kind of can't really pin down exactly what type of creative I am, because I kind of have eggs in every single basket. I keep my options very open.
Yeah, and that's what's really cool, you know, about a lot of the work that you've been recently doing. And you know what? Let's just actually talk about your thesis work, which I think embodies that perfectly. Actually, I'll let you say the title. What is this piece that you call, and what you want to talk about?
Yeah, so this piece is called You Have Observed Me Every Day, But What Was There to Witness? And it is accumulation of, I think, 225 monoprints. It might be a little bit more than that. It's kind of been growing over the past semester as I've continued to print and add to it. But it's basically, I've been calling them sculptural prints. They're sort of, all the monoprints have been joined together to create 9 tapestries.
Wow.
That then get hung together to create one larger tapestry or sculptural print. And it sort of is exploring hidden layers, unseen textures, and the potentiality for composition to form subconsciously. In the beginning, it was an exploration of graffiti covering, or better referred to as buffing, which is the action of covering graffiti or unwanted marks in a city, and sort of exploring how those accumulations that have formed naturally from, you know, dealing with graffiti and stuff, like removing destruction, basically, how those marks that are left behind, the remnants, can be then transform back into a creative process to create new composition.
And the post-vandalism.
Yes, yeah, it is. It definitely would align with the sort of like thinking and knowledge of post-vandalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, like, just looking at this piece, if I remember correctly, you said 18 by 12 feet.
Yes, it's 18 feet long approximately, because each tapestry is about 6 feet. So
Wow.
I haven't actually measured the actual print because it's really, really big. But the wall, when I was hanging it up during like my final crit, it pretty much covered the whole room. So,
Yeah.
and it's like twice my height. So I'm 6 foot. So
Yeah,
I
no,
assume it's 12.
With the images you shown here, I feel like it doesn't even do justice of how big it actually looks. You know, you were able to capture so much beautiful colors on top of like the composition of how you do it, because I noticed, like, especially here, I feel like there's a lot of those stringy aspects inside of those cube, like, bordering it, and it creates a really nice like sectioning of it. And you know, I was looking at the details from the images you showed me, and you know, I want you to talk about a little bit about the process and what you specifically did with these prints.
Yeah, for sure. So I can first start with actually like saying that all of the prints that are layered on top of each other, the only adhesion that has been done is to the individual, as I've been calling them, compositional building blocks. So there's, as it is 9 tapestries, they're all attached together to make the tapestries, but they don't actually get adhered or anything, so they have the ability to change or alter depending on like if they've been walked by and they get moved with the wind or something. But the process all began with sourcing my sort of building blocks. So I do a lot of walking around the city and exploration, urban just discovery, and that sort of like I've been very fascinated with buffing, graffiti covering as a subjectivity for how composition can form naturally. We tend to a lot when we look at like street art or graffiti and stuff, we like to either say that it's vandalism or it's street art. Like there's no in between the lines. So like my sort of thinking was, how can a composition form without having to be directly created? Like someone say, I'm gonna go make street art, or I'm gonna go make a tag. And so it's sort of exploring this idea that was coined by another artist named Matt McCormick, who explored in Portland in 2001 to 2003. He made a short film documentary basically exploring this idea of subconscious art, which is, as he describes it, there's someone has tagged the wall, they've created graffiti, and then the city has sent somebody to clean it up by buffing it, and they have subconsciously created a mark. Like there's mark making being created by the covering of the graffiti.
Yeah.
But the person who was told to do that never went and said, oh, I'm going to make the shape exactly like this, or oh, I'm going to use this color. They're just trying to match the environment that's already there and basically eradicate the graffiti without any thought to composition. But the resulting marks, as McCormick explains, can be compositions on their own. What I aim to do further with my thesis and my print, you have observed me every day, but what was there to witness, was take those individual compositions and say maybe they're not compositions on their own, but they're pieces that could be put or adhered within a larger composition. To go back to, I guess, I was walking with my partner, and there was, I capture every buff, but there was this one very interesting buff that I'd been following for a couple months, where it was on the side of a mall and in their little alleyway loading dock zone, and it has like, there was a very specific cream color of the wall, and then they had gone and buffed in like 3 different colors of gray.
Really?
So like very, very different contrast and stuff. But because the layers had been forming naturally on top of each other, they created this sort of like almost like Rothko type painting with these shapes and stuff. And I was like, that's really cool. It's already like, to me, merits being a composition. But now how can I extract all of these 2 compositional building blocks and create the composition? So that's what I did. And I basically took these 3 pieces of the wall and, well, the buffs from the wall, and converted them into digital bitmaps using layer separation so that I could create, well, bitmaps of the pieces as they existed. And then those were then transferred into CMYK prints.
Yes.
And from those CMYK prints, I then further was like, okay, I've been able to reproduce, like, you know, from life what the shapes would look like with all the proper colors. What happens if I extract it further and just do the cyan bitmap, the magenta bitmap, and the yellow bitmap to create the smaller pieces of this wall? And that's when I started playing with layering and stuff. So taking only the cyan pieces, only the magenta pieces, or only the yellow pieces, and printing them repeatedly on top of each other to create new layers, new extractions and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was a whole, like, you know, to tie back full circle to like the subjectivity and like what's being discussed and about, that was all done subconsciously as well. So instead of saying like, I'm going to register this print and use registration marks and like make sure that the print lands in the exact same spot each time, it was a process of just dropping the paper naturally, letting the vacuum table let it fall randomly, and then randomly printing until there was no, you know, human control or control from me to where these pieces were falling. The only action that I had was deciding what shape to use. And that was a process that went through to create 9 layers. So 3 cyan, 3 magenta, 3 yellow. But it was also like each compositional building block, I pulled 75 monoprints.
Wow.
So that every possible combination of cyan, magenta, yellow, yellow, magenta, cyan, cyan, magenta, cyan, yellow, so on and so forth, was pulled 5 times to create 5 unique monoprints. So not a single print within the whole 225 prints is identical. They're all unique. They all have their own texture, variation, color, and they've all formed naturally. So there's no deciding. The only kind of curating that went on was doing the final thing, which was like cutting them out and then adhering them all together to create the tapestries. But other than that, it was all naturally occurring.
Yeah, no, there's so much to unpack there, but I think one of the things that you said that I think is so interesting is, you know, you were talking about the people who do buff this street art that we, you know, whatever you want to call it, graffiti, whatever, but you kind of mimic that same thing where it's like, well, all that I'm controlling is creating the shape of what the image is going to come out to. And I found that really interesting that, you know, you're almost putting in their, not necessarily their work ethic, because I think your work ethic is way more than what they're doing, but, you know, their idea of just like, okay, well, whatever, this is the shape, I'm just going to cover it up.
Yeah.
And to, you know, I was wondering, because I realized that there's a lot of CMYK in it, but there's also, you see oranges pop out, you see a little bit of pinks pop out, you see like light blues, and so it gets really interesting because, you know, it has that heavy CMYK feel, but if you keep looking at the details, not only are you going to see different colors, you're going to see the different details in the walls that you got from, and that's what I think is really cool to see. And to think that you know, chained up like for what is 6 different tapestries you were saying, or 9 different tapestries with all different images of this, like the same thing but in different methods and different like modes. It's just so insane to me, and it's so sick to see.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like, it's sort of working with the idea of like, the original working title was Subconscious Accumulations, and it was basically, they weren't displayed as tapestries, they were just straight across a wall, as if they were like on like an advertising hoarding, kind of just like postered up. And it was through further exploration that it was like, okay, there is a way that like, maybe because what I'm talking about is about stuff that's hidden naturally in the city, maybe there is some merit to obscuring parts of it, right? What like really starts to, and it doesn't read the same in pictures when you're there in person, is it is a very sculptural thing, like it's coming off the wall physically. So if you're looking, depending on where you're standing, you're gonna get a different view sort of through a little hole or a window that is, the rest of the print is obstructing it, but you'll see sort of texture and composition that you wouldn't see otherwise. Much like if you observe anywhere in the city where something's been covered, if you look close enough, you'll still be able to see what is underneath that new layer of paint, because really like all a city is it's made up of layers. It's accumulations of texture, it's accumulations of past uses of space, and that can be said with anything, like even the sidewalk and stuff. Like this sort of idea of subconscious art is shared by a bunch of other artists where, for example, if you were to take like the construction markings that have been left behind after they've done underground work, they're no longer serving their like purpose of being like construction, but they're still there present on the sidewalk, and they're like a memory of something that's happened there, just like how this is pulling from a memory of graffiti being covered. To mention like with the color and stuff, it is all, since it's a process that has been broken, generally in print when you're doing like CMYK printing, you're trying to get your registration like spot on, because it creates weird dither and weird texture and stuff. But I was almost allowing the process to embrace that, because that was sort of like what naturally occurs. There's no control. Like I don't want there to be control, because it wasn't created in the real world with control. It was naturally forming, naturally occurring. And I mean, the choice to use the cyan, magenta, and yellow is purely to pull it back into, you know, the traditions of printmaking, like the print process, and even just like process printing in general. That's how we print. We print in layers as well. And it's just interesting to me when we break the rules of the layering and stuff, what can be created.
This piece, you know, embodies a lot of those mediums that you do play with, especially printmaking is at the forefront. But I think a lot of your, you know, we'll say your street work, because I feel you've done a lot with murals, but not even limited to that, but just photography with architecture. You know, I think you've meshed a lot of those ideas together, and to, you know, almost like what you were saying, it almost now like does feel like a representation of the city. You know, it's one of those things where you go to this one random corner in, like, I don't know, maybe Kensington, I don't know, maybe Kensington, but, you know, and then you find that one holy grail like shop, then you're like, wow, how did I not know this is here? So yeah, I absolutely love this piece, just because there's so much detail that's put into it, and you have so many different moving parts to it, and
thank you.
It's just awesome to see. I wish I could have seen it in person before it was taken down from this specific spot, but
yeah,
it will be at Grad X, so do come out, come see Laiken's piece, because it's absolutely amazing. And you know what, let's just move on to my next question. What kind of messages are you trying to tackle with this piece, or would you like to try and tackle with this piece?
Yeah, so I mean, I could answer this two ways. I've got two different ways of answering this. The first and like most blatant thing that I'm trying to like get off to people is like, pay attention in your city. There is so much stuff that you just won't notice unless you're like actively looking for it. Like there is the potential for composition anywhere, and don't let anyone tell you that there isn't, because there is. Like, if you take a 10-minute walk down anywhere and stuff, you can see stuff, and you may be passing this same wall every day on your way to work, on your way to school, and you may be ignoring or like subconsciously not even noticing that there is a difference in like the slightest difference in paint color on a wall, or like something has been covered. But once you like activate and allow your mind to see those things, it's all you're going to see. You're going to be like, oh, there's a composition there, there's a composition there, there's a composition forming here. And so that's sort of like one of the major things I want to. And the second would be probably like addressing why as a society we deem graffiti or vandalism as such a negative thing and has such a negative connotation that we have to cover it up. Yet once we've covered it up, we tolerate and allow these marks of their past remnants to remain. It's a absurd sort of idea to think that someone who has gone out and freely created something, regardless of its like artistic merit, like if it's a tag, sure, there's you could argue forever if it's artistic or not. Is it calligraphy? Is it a form of, you know, creating type, whatever? But like there's also people that do like huge pieces where they've spent like an hour or two painting a huge thing with letters and composition and stuff, and it looks lovely, and then within 10 minutes it's painted over and it's solid gray again. But that solid gray mark will stay there for forever because they don't clean it up, they don't come back and paint it properly again. So I think it's like addressing that question too of like, why is one thing okay but the other thing is not? And if the other thing is okay, is there a way to do this better? Like, is there a way to, instead of, you know, remove creativity and destroy the potentiality for composition, is there a way to take the way that we're covering graffiti or responding to graffiti and turn it into something that is artistic, you know, has artistic merit, value, and is maybe more comforting than this sterile sort of environment that we're left with otherwise?
Yeah, no, I you know, I think, and it's really interesting because I don't know, you might know more, you will know more. Like, is graffiti illegal still in Toronto? So,
yes.
Yeah, and you know, it's so funny because it's still considered to be an illegal thing to do because you don't want to mark up property that people own. But, you know, then we have these spaces that they create for people to go graffiti. So it's like, you obviously, they have like seen graffiti as more than just a mark making and as art, and they will try and give that space. But then once it like goes onto someone's property, maybe they don't like it or something, then it's like a whole problem. And it's like, okay.
So it's a very interesting thing, and every city obviously has their own bylaws and stuff regarding and stuff. But for Toronto specifically, like within the municipal code chapter 4, say 435 or something,
Okay.
436. It lays out the rules and laws surrounding graffiti and what is merited as vandalism or not. And the sort of consensus in the city is any mark that is put onto any surface, public or private, without prior permission from the city or the property owner, so on and so forth, is vandalism. It
Wow.
is destruction of property, and it is not tolerated, it is not allowed. And even if a private property owner has said, yeah, you can paint on my wall, if the city comes along and deems it as illegal graffiti, they can also clean it up at the expense of the property owner.
Yeah.
Sort of this idea of public and private is something that sort of gets talked about and explained a lot too, because you can look at it either way. If it's my private property, why can't I have graffiti on it? Because the city deems that it's within their jurisdiction and stuff. And if it's public property, why can't we vandalize it or do graffiti on it? Because it's public space, which means it should be used by the public however they choose to use it. The sort of idea, even with stuff like Graffiti Alley and stuff, it was set up as a sort of means to protect culture and heritage and stuff, but still within, because of the bylaws and stuff, it still only protects the property owners and not the graffiti writer.
Wow.
And it solely comes down to no city will ever allow graffiti or vandalism, because once you say, yeah, it's allowed here, either one, no one does it there because it's legal, so what's the point? Or two, it spreads beyond that, because once you give a little bit of room for, like, you know, budging the sort of line and stuff, people continue to push that. Now, within the city of Toronto too, they still, like, they've laid out all the terms and stuff. It's not that graffiti is illegal, they just have to deem it as graffiti art, which is now, that blurs the line between, you know, obviously, like, graffiti historically has always been referred to as, you know, it's a form of vandalism. There's an artistic form of vandalism, but it's vandalism nonetheless. Within the past decade or so, there's been a large explosion with street art and stuff, obviously, and that has kind of now, like, graffiti has been co-opted into street art, and if it's done legally or commissioned, it's graffiti art. Like, it is permissible. There still is this really strange imbalance between what is permissible, what is not. And I mean, I kind of aim to have that sort of be changed, right? Like, there's no reason that we should be putting so much money into the removal of graffiti and, you know, deterring graffiti and vandalism, when that money could instead be put into creating art or creating places where people can do this and it isn't a nuisance, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we can go on about graffiti and its many different viewpoints, but I would like to go to my next question and kind of talk about, you know, how would you compare your art from first year to your art that you're making now?
Yeah, so first year, I was a graphic designer.
Yeah.
I'm still in the design program and stuff. So from, like, first year to now, I've definitely gone through, like, a huge transition. When I was in first year, I was doing, like, type design, book layouts, brochures, package design, you know, the fundamentals of design, the basics. And it was kind of over, like, COVID. I was doing a minor in art and public spaces, which no longer exists at OCAD, which is pretty sad. But I wasn't able to finish that minor because of COVID and the classes not being offered and stuff. So I had transfer credits and I transferred into a printmaking and publication minor. And that sort of opened up new horizons for me to, like, explore an analog and traditional print practice, which is so fucking cool. Like, it's like night and day between, like, there's obviously, like, before as a designer, I was just hitting print and then it would digitally come out and it's like, there you go, final product. But now it's like the sort of next step of taking a digital design I've created with my design skills, transferring it into an analog printout to burn into a screen and then pull all the prints. That's pretty magical to me, and it's definitely a huge transition. Like, it's really, really pushed sort of, like, how I see my creative practice and stuff. I also, like, obviously, like, before going to OCAD and stuff, I had a little bit of a presence as an artist assistant with a few sort of prolific, semi-prolific street artists and stuff within the city doing murals. And so that definitely informed my practice for today with my printmaking and sort of exploration of urban surface and urban space. I feel like deep down I've always had the potentiality to be a printmaker or want to be a printmaker in me. I just never really had the space to do it. But after taking like a little bit of a, like after I wrapped up my major and stuff and I had the extra year because I wanted to do a thesis and stuff, it's just been a lot of exploration of just that, just print. And I love it so much. It's the best.
I mean, yeah, no, from what you were saying, you've always kind of been exploring different horizons and different methods to inform your own practice. And I find that really awesome because, you have the mind of a graphic designer, but, you've also worked hands-on with murals and street art, and now you're, I already said this already, but, to create all that and then be able to create it into mesh that into one piece, I think is really cool, and it encapsulates a lot of what your sentiments are and what you want to create. And I think that's really awesome.
I think it's definitely, for me, it's pushing beyond just doing digital design. I think one thing that a lot of designers forget is that graphic design as an industry and as a market and stuff originally started as an analog process. It was using die cut and letter press and all these sort of analog print tools. Even the print process today for magazines and publication and stuff still use plate lithographic printing and stuff. It's just all digitally done now. It's no longer someone manually creating each plate. A machine just does it immediately. And so I sort of want to take a step. A lot of people in design are going fully digital, AI, all this, design and code and everything and stuff. And I started to learn it and I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to take a step back into where design came from, before, the only way to print shirts and stuff a lot of the time was screen print and stuff, before we had heat press and before we had sort of all these crazy inkjet and laser print potentialities for material and stuff. It was a very analog process, and I kind of want to bring design back to its roots, and that sort of now kind of leans way more into an artistic practice and stuff, because even as a designer, when you're doing that, your work has that look, that aesthetic, right? You're either creating with those methodologies because you want it to have a specific feel, it's made in a certain time, or because you're trying to push the potentiality. One of I had a class in third year, and the whole sort of process of the class, it was an in-out-in process. So it was digital in, bring it out to analog, put it back into digital, and then bring it back out into analog. So an in-out, in-out. And that really informs, I think, even me to this day about how I design and stuff, is that it's no longer just create the design and it's finished. Sort of all my pieces and work that I create, they're living compositions. There's still the potential for me to go back and put it back into a digital process or put it out into an analog process.
I mean, you're even talking about with your thesis that you're still adding on new things, right? So it is that in and out process. I do want to ask the final question of the interview, sadly. Going back to your first year self again, what kind of advice would you give yourself, knowing all the things you know now, to your first year self?
Yeah, don't give up. Hope is there, and don't be afraid to explore beyond just your program, especially if you have the potential, the opportunity. You're at a school that has all these crazy, amazing studios and all these amazing people that can assist you in helping you create whatever you want. Don't be afraid to go and do it, even if it is scary. I wish even that I had done some of the other classes, for example, welding or the woodworking classes and stuff, because there's just so much possibility at the school. And I find a lot of the time people get locked into their program and they stick with it the whole time. And I'm guilty of it too. I almost did 2.5 years of just digital design and stuff before I went maybe I'll take a print class. And it 180'd, it shifted everything for me. And it would definitely also be there is the potential to do stuff beyond just, traditional design. And I mean, I'd probably also tell myself maybe get your work in a little bit more on time, like we have a little bit more time management skills.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it all comes with time. As much as I could give my like past self advice, I'm kind of happy with the way that I did it myself too, because I learned so much about myself.
Yeah, and that's something, I think that's a great way to, at least view what you've done and how you've gone, like kind of come to that part, of your artistic career, and, to be at a place where you're happy about like all the exploration you already did and all the work you've done. That's only what I feel like an artist could hope for, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think it's definitely even just like my transition from being like, before I used to say that I was a graphic designer.
Mm-hmm.
Now my business card says interdisciplinary artist and designer. And I tend to lead with being an artist before a designer now. I think I'll obviously never let go of my design fundamentals, and I'll never let go of being a designer, because I think like design isn't always just like, a title. Like I feel like since design is a process, design can be implemented into any creative practice. Like I think something that a lot of people forget is that all designers have the possibility to be an artist. Not all artists have the possibility to be a designer. And it solely comes down to, because design is just a way of thinking. Like it is iteration, iterative thinking, problem solving, creative solutions. And that's not to say that if you're not a designer with it being an artist that it's any better or worse. I think it's just, it definitely informs how you go about solving a problem. Like I could have just gone in and been like, all right, I'm going to print because I want to print. But instead I went and said, okay, this is my system. This is my colors. This is my shapes. And I built that system. And that's sort of like what being a designer is.
Yeah. Well, Laiken, thank you so much for all your designer knowledge being shared on today. Before we end off this episode, is there anything you'd like to plug, promote, or put out there for the world to know?
Yeah, obviously May 1st to 5th, come to Grad X, check out my work.
Don't
It'll be on the second floor in the transitory gallery between Ignite and Add a Slate. Love to see you there. If you want to check out more of my work, you can check out my website, laikenbro.format.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at laikenbro. If you need any projects done, any printing, I can do fine art printing for you. I can print your business cards, t-shirts, whatever you want. Just hit me up and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Hit Laiken up if you want to see more work, or hire for some work.
Yes.
You are absolutely amazing. I'm so excited to see your thesis in person, May 1st, May 1st to 5th, May 5th. And don't miss it. I know I won't. Again, Laiken, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. I hope you had as good of a time as I did talking
Absolutely.
to you. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for watching this episode of Artistic Visions. Cannot wait to see you guys very, very soon. Take it easy and have a good week, weekend, or a general day. Bye.
Bye. Take it easy. See you May 1st to 5th.
May 1st to 5th.